Hi, I'm Frank Dunn. In 2014, I founded Jonathan Circle to be a safe space where men of any kind could integrate two parts of their lives, sex and spirit. The most challenging of all the challenging things for opening Jonathan Circle was that a great many men told me then and still tell me now that they aren't interested in what we have to offer because they're not religious. And it helps little for me to say, well, you don't have to be religious in order to be a spiritual person. If you're alive, you are one by definition. You have ways of expressing yourself. Don't you ever do it with enthusiasm? Well, that's spirit. Do you ever do it in a quiet and restrained way? Well, that's spirit. Spirit is the vivaciousness or lack of vivaciousness with which we express ourselves. Most people can relate to the fact that at a sports event, people are full of spirit. Well, the same thing may be true of people in churches and synagogues or temples the world over. And of course, there's a difference in the focus and a difference in the trigger, but spirit is spirit. And if you're alive, and I assume you are if you're listening to this or watching it, then you are a person with spirit. And if you are a human being, no matter what shape it takes, you have erotic energy, which is pretty much, in my opinion, the same thing as spirit. But it comes out usually in ways that are more directly sexual. And that's far beyond what I want to do today. Today actually is the first of a series of monologues, of conversations I want to invite you into so that they become dialogues and group conversations, not just monologues for me, that I'm calling 360 and subtitling sections and tangents, the parts of a circle, and those things that lead off from a circle. Today is pretty much in the center of things that have to do with Jonathan Circle and the process of integrating sex and spirit. I want to talk about what it is that really makes us authentic or not. Authenticity, like originality, is something you cannot contrive. To be authentic means you simply have to be yourself. To be original means that you have to trust yourself. To be creative means that you have to draw from that well of authenticity and originality in some way, even if you're synthesizing ideas or techniques that you've learned from other people. It has to come from you. And I find that the single hardest thing to do. It's at the heart of being both spiritual and sexual. To be authentic, to be present, to be available, to be open. When I was a kid, I used to love to pretend, and as a matter of fact, some of my earliest memories have to do with having imaginary playmates. I can still remember where they lived behind certain bushes in the yard, or um, over in a neighbor's backyard, or under a tree, or in a hole sometimes. I would go around and have conversations with these people that were as real to me as any human being was or is. Well, this went on and morphed into play acting a good deal when I was 8 or 9 years old. And so I would spend my summers scripting plays and co opting my younger brother, who was far less inclined to this sort of thing than I, into being in supportive roles and so on. I could go on about that for some time, and maybe later in another one of these tangents, I may do so. Uh, but the woman who kept me while my mother worked asked me one day, "Why are you always trying to be somebody you're not?" And I thought, well, that's a very strange question. I'm not trying to be somebody I'm not. I'm just trying to have fun playing roles and so forth. But her question set me to thinking, and that night I came up with an idea that I would, in fact, play a role and that I would be Frank Dunn 20 years in the future. And so the next morning, when I got up and she came in, I said, "Well, I've come up with an idea. What would it be like if I pretended to be Frank Dunn 20 years from now?" To which she replied with a question: "Who else are you going to be but Frank Dunn 20 years from now?" Well, let me tell you something. That was just about as important a word with a capital W as anyone has ever spoken to me, because it has actually been the theme of my life pretty much ever since. If I'm not going to be Frank Dunn, who else am I going to be? Well, I have a biography that's probably a lot like yours, and that is it's taken me a dadgum long time to figure out who Frank Dunn is. It's a lot easier to say I want to be Frank Dunn than to figure out who Frank Dunn really is. And I'm not sure that I ever will. I'm not sure that I ever can. In fact, my husband read a book some few years ago that he shared with me, and I think the title of it is Giving Account of Oneself. And the theory of the author is that one cannot do that. It's impossible to give an account of yourself, which is tantamount to saying you don't really know who you are. And even if you think you know who you are, you really can't fully explain your actions, your behavior, your choices, your desires. It's impossible to give an account of yourself. Although we are told repeatedly by all kinds of authority figures, cultural sources, media, that we really ought to be able to do that. And some people spend fortunes going to therapists and others in whom I have great trust, generally speaking. I count myself among them to some degree, trying to find out who they really are and to understand themselves. Well, there's nothing wrong with trying to understand yourself, but I promise you, knowing yourself is a very hard thing. So, what does it mean to be authentic if you can't know yourself, if you can't give an account of yourself? How do you know you're being authentic? Well, fact of the matter is, I don't know when I'm being authentic. I only know when I think I'm being authentic. But what I do know is that some things jibe with who I've always been and who deep down I believe myself to be. That has changed over the years, but there's a core that has been pretty consistent. Down deep, I think I know what accords with who I am and who I'm not. Now, there's a lot more to say on that subject, and today is a conversation that I want not to be too long because I don't want these things to go on forever. We can return to them, and what I really want to do is to kick up a conversation with you and to find out how all of this lands with you and how it is that you appropriate these things and deal with them yourself. So, here is a question for you. When you are being authentic, when you are speaking your mind, when you're speaking from your heart, what does it feel like? What does it feel like? Does it feel good? Does it feel frightening? Does it feel, well, for lack of a better word, right? Or not? Here's my theory that authenticity, even though we may be very incomplete in our understanding of what true authenticity for ourselves really is, authenticity always strikes us as truth. It strikes us as right. It strikes us as something that's in the sweet spot of who we are down deep. Now, here's what the point of all this is. We talk a lot about being present, about being mindful, about being available, about connecting with other people. Huge numbers of men and women are looking for some connection that will give meaning to their life. And there is no way of of finding that special source, that special person, that special embodiment that will ever last unless we first have made peace with who we are. Sometimes I tell people who are interviewing for positions, and I do less now than I once did, but I still do a fair amount of vocational counseling. When you're interviewing for a job, always present yourself as who you are, because then if you don't get it, it will be a favor to you because what you really are is not what they're looking for. And if you present yourself as something other than that and you get the job or not, then the one who got it is neither you nor the person you are pretending to be. So always be who you are. And the same thing is true in a romantic relationship or a sexual relationship. If you cannot be yourself, who are you going to be? If you're going to be rejected, let it be because someone doesn't understand or appreciate or can't connect with you. But don't waste time trying to be somebody you're not. It's a lot more easily said than done. Agreed. But I think the principle is one that is valuable and one that is trustworthy. So that's enough for today. If you're not going to be yourself, who are you going to be? And we will return to this and other issues in other segments and other tangents of coming full circle, 360 degrees. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. And I would like nothing better than to hear from you. And if you want to be a part of a conversation, you have my contact information. You can find it below.